Hello and welcome to the Low Distance Record podcast, where we speak to people in and around the music industry to try and find out what the hell's going on, what we should be doing, and any advice for people out there looking to, get heard a bit more. Alan, you are here, aren't you?
I am. I'm here. I'm very excited for this one. The two guys we're going to interview have really kind of gone places in the last year or so, running their own record label. So I have loads of questions that I want to dig into, see how it all works.
Yeah, it's Tony and Dorian from Goo Records in Brighton, which was founded in the summer of 2022. They have this thing where they just sign acts for like a one release basis, and it seems to be at the moment it's like a 7-inch. So what, A side, B side, although sometimes I managed to get 4 songs on a vinyl. Great. I love the music they've done. They've got a real strong thread. I'm looking forward to asking them, is that deliberate or did it just happen to come that way? So yeah, let's see how we get on.
So how did you guys meet then?
Oh, we've known each other ages, actually. Yeah, we first worked together about 11, 12 years ago in our day jobs in the sort of digital agency world. I moved down to Brighton from London and started freelancing somewhere, and Dorian worked there. So, but we realised we both had an interest in music, so we became mates. And it's been beautiful love affair since then, and it does.
It might even be longer than 12 years, actually, mightn't it?
Yeah, possibly.
I think.
Yeah.
I think it was you were still a fresh-faced 39-year-old when we.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah,
13 or so years, something like that. But yeah, and so day job.
And was that just that sheer love of music that kind of
brought us together, I guess. Yeah. And then Dorian went off to work somewhere else, and so we didn't work in the same place for a number of years, but we stayed mates, sort of seeing bands and everything. Yeah, so that's always what sort of kept the friendship going, I guess, was going to see gigs and all that kind of thing.
And then we DJed together for a bit.
I was going to ask if you'd been musicians or any bands in together or anything like that.
Well, you were in bands, weren't you, Tony?
Yeah, I was in an indie band in my 20s, actually. I was a singer playing the Dublin Castle and the Camden Falcon and all those sorts of places in the late 90s. And
What was the band called?
They were called Melodica. You would never have heard of us. I think we got played once by Gary Crowley. I think that was like the.
Well, that's not too. That's more than a lot of bands get, right?
It was all right. He liked our demo, and it never really went anywhere. But yeah, and then in my sort of late 30s, early 40s, I played bass in a band for a little while, but never really had the talent, to be honest. But always just enjoyed dabbling and having a play. But me and Dorian have DJed at parties and stuff for years, and then just before the pandemic, we started like playing in pubs and stuff and Brighton a bit, and then the pandemic hit, so we started doing like online shows every Saturday, and we kept that going for about a year, didn't we? Sort of just broadcasting every Saturday night, just playing like indie sets and stuff, which is quite a lot of fun.
What were you broadcasting over? Just doing it over Instagram or Facebook, or what was it?
What was it called again? Music.
Oh. Do you know, I've gone completely blank on what it's called. It was Mixler.
Mixlr, yeah. It was a special sort of like broadcasty thing you could do.
So you could you could stream your set and record it, and people could chat. So there was like a sort of chat window, so people would request songs or tell us the song we were playing was terrible or whatever.
No, play the full 12-inch version of Commons, people. What are you doing with the set? That kind of thing.
Yeah, that kind of thing. So that was quite good, and that kept us, I suppose, busy during the pandemic when everything was so quiet, But it's funny, now we're doing the label. It's almost like why didn't we think of this before? It just seems so obvious.
Was that like a natural thing or was that something you've been thinking about, or pipe dreams and all that kind of thing? Thinking, wouldn't it be great?
And then pipe dreams, I guess. Yeah, I think you kind of, when you think about something, you think it's going to be kind of really, really difficult to do. And I get and how do you go about it, right? And until we just decided just have a go at it, really.
Yeah, I think Dorian's wife was really encouraging. she was just always really lovely and just said, why don't you try it? Why don't you try it? Why don't you try it? When we were probably a little bit more defeatist about it. And I think then when you start, you realise actually you have picked up some stuff along the way, just from being around the band scene. Maybe you've been in bands and just, you know, probably like yourselves, we've read a lot, you know, about labels and stuff. There were certain labels that we had in mind that we like, well, we want to follow that model because we admire it. And
who was that
we
then?
like it.
What labels did you look at and think they're the ones we want to do?
Well, I suppose the obvious one was Fierce Panda, just what they did in the 90s. That whole thing around basically putting singles out, you know, not necessarily signing a band for a long time. Obviously, they famously put out, you know, first Coldplay record and that kind of thing. So it was that. And just obviously, you know, Simon was a bit of a ledge. So for us, it was about, you know, have we got good ears? You know, I think we have. But then the other label was probably Merge Records as well. I'll let Dorian say that one because that's close to your heart, isn't it?
Yeah, so I listened to a podcast and this guy called Mac, who's in a band called Superchunk and started Merge Records, and it was him just talking about how they started initially to release their own 7 inches, but then releasing other people's. They had super simple kind of contracting, you know, you contract on a record by record basis, 50-50 split. So, you know, really kind of straightforward. And they kind of went on doing for that for years. And one of the bands they signed was Arcade Fire. So they ended up making a load of money out of that. So for years of doing kind of underground acts and kind of sort of, you know, they put out Neutral Milk Hotel, sort of cult acts and stuff like that. Then you get lucky, right? So and you think, well, and it's nice to hear a story of people who kind of they've gone into it with the good, you know, the right intentions. They're sort of band friendly. You know, we want to be artist friendly as well, and that really inspired me, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there's a podcast I listen to by a guy in Canada called Other Record Labels, and he interviews record labels, you know, a bit like this, really. And all the ones he interviews, you know, from the people just doing like cassettes in their bedroom in Halifax to someone, you know, Sub Pop, whatever, it kind of does all start with people who just really love music. It's no one ever goes, well, we started because we wanted to make $1 million. It's like we started because we had a record to put out or our mates had a record to put out. And I very much get the ethos with you guys that, I mean, your sound, you're like, what, 4 EPs in now, are you? I think.
Yeah.
And you've really got a really clear sound. Not to say that everything sounds the same, because it doesn't. But I know before I heard a Goo, I mean, I'm going to flag this up now on the camera. If you listen to the podcast, I have to imagine this. I bought the canned pineapple EP when I was down in Brighton, which lovely orange thing. And I played it to Alan when you were around, didn't Alan? And what was the first thing you said to me?
I was like, this is so you.
You were like, this is so you, because it's exactly my kind of music. So every time I see you guys have got something up, like, I know I'm going to love this. So how important is that?
Wow.
Did you have that kind of blueprint in mind? Like, we want to sign slightly scruffy pop punky bands, or was it just that you happened to see, you know, Welly, who were fantastic and have got that kind of cheeky chappy vibe, and you've got Canned Pineapple who are the same?
There's lots of things I could say to answer that. I mean, firstly, like, we always definitely wanted to create a label where people would go, oh, if they've signed to Goo, I'm probably going to like them. So that, you know, so that's lovely to sort of hear what you're saying. I think, but no, in terms of it, there being a sense of a coherent sound, I think it's just purely natural and organic. I think it's just what me and Dorian like, you know. I think we've probably got similar tastes, but we have to agree on the band. We have to like them. We have to sing them live a lot of times. I would probably also go back for what we were saying earlier. Welly were sort of also an inspiration for starting the label, because we saw them like 6 months before we started the label, and then just kept going back and watching them, because we were like, this band are phenomenal, and I do still genuinely believe they're going to become massive this year, or if not this year, the next year. And so they were probably quite a big stimulus for starting up. But I guess I mean, I'll pass to you, Dorian, but there's probably there's something in the pop hook, there's something in that magic single thing that we love. Don't want the song to go on more than 3 minutes, probably going to get bored. Personality, a sense of humor, a sense of the absurd, probably all those things. They probably naturally come through in what we like.
I mean,
we've had, you go.
we've had quite a few people approach us asking if we'll release their stuff, which is great, and some of the stuff's really good, but it just isn't quite what we're looking for, particularly when we were starting out and it was just 7 inches. And you're thinking, but even with the kind of the stuff we're going to release next, which is going to be 12 inches, more tracks on it. We still want some immediacy to it, something that people will hear. We're not, as much as I might enjoy a like sprawling kind of 10-minute sort of psych odyssey or something, it's not kind of what we're looking for.
We're not
at the
going to put
moment,
that up. Yeah.
and so I
Yeah.
guess you do get, and I think actually with the sound's broadening out a bit, I would say. But you're right. I think when we put bands on together, what I like is that they don't sound like each other, but they work on a bill together.
There's common thread.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you mentioned there the 7 inches. I mean, the sort of the rationale was if you're going to do stuff on vinyl, you've got to do a 12-inch and you're going to charge 20 quid for it and it's going to have 9 or 10 songs in it. And you sort of went, no, we're going to do 7 inches. I know the Canned Pineapple's got 4 songs on it, but that's because they're very, very short. But
Exactly.
the Welly is a classic A and B side, isn't the first Welly one. I think another EP you've got has got 3 tracks on it.
yeah.
So what?
Owners Club. Yeah.
Yeah, but you're selling them for what, £10, I think. So some people might go, "Oh, that's a lot," but obviously you found that not. So how did you land on that we're going to do the 7-inch thing?
I think there's a few things. One is that it was sort of just we like the idea of singles, and we had a bit of discussion because how every band releases 15 singles right on Spotify.
Yes.
And that sort of, in a way, devalues the concept of the single. If you just basically drip feed your album, every track of it, and each one's a single, none of them are singles in a way. So I kind of like the idea that we're putting something out as a single release. And it's also, it isn't quite as expensive, obviously, as doing an album. A lot of the people, we were working with initially, they didn't have an album ready either. They're looking to get something out, but I don't think a lot of bands think in album terms in quite the same way as they used to because of the way they used to releasing. So I think it made it a bit easier in that way as well. And we like the idea of there being a nice little artifact, an orange vinyl or a white vinyl 7 inches, a nice little thing as well.
Yeah, and it's probably an age thing, We just remember buying 7 inches ourselves. It was special, it was exciting, So yeah, it was just trying to make it a special little thing, and not many people else seem to be doing it, But like Dorian says, the next releases probably are going to be 12 inches, but that's not to say they always will be going forward. But that's just where we are next.
What was the Welly track you put? Was it me and your mates? Was it
Me
that
and my
one?
mates.
Yeah, well, so it was the live version of Me and Your Mates. Yeah. And Home for the Weekend was actually the A side. Yeah, but obviously Me and Your Mates is the big.
Yeah, we put that on our. I think our first
thing.
I think
our very first playlist.
Our very first playlist, we put Welly.
We had
I think
Welly
1
on
or 2
it,
on it. Yeah, because we loved it. I'd seen them at the George's Tavern, and I was like, these guys are great, and they're dressed like they're about to do sports day, and it's all slightly weird. And they've got a drum, and he sounds. I think he says himself he sounds like a Middle England Ian Dury or something, which he kind of does, the singer, which is great. Just finally on the 7 inches, and obviously you're going to go to the 12 inches. Do you find that getting them into record stores has proved a problem because they go, oh no, we only want the big 12 inches we can put in the boxes? Or have you found that actually, I mean, I got this one, Canned Pineapple, in a record store in Brighton, so obviously you have had some success, but have you found it difficult to get a distribution network going for it?
No, not difficult. I mean, when we started, we were doing it directly ourselves. So we went to Resident Records in Brighton and we said, will you stock our single? Basically, that was it. And they absolutely got behind it. I have to say, they
loved it.
And actually they sold a load. Each of the ones we put out, the record stores have sold decent. We're working with a distributor now, so they're getting them into more stores. It'll be easier to get 12 inches into more stores, I think, than 7 inches, definitely. And the other thing, there's a few reasons, I guess, why we're kind of moving a bit towards 12 inches. One is for that reason, I think, and they have a longer shelf life. than singles, so it's easier to sell it for longer. They're more economic to make and sell.
Yeah.
So there's a few things behind 12 inches that make it a little bit easier. But no, we certainly don't think we had any problems getting them in. I mean, but I don't know. I don't know if we'd gone to Rough Trade in London with our first single and said, "Would you stock it?" I don't know what they would have said, but
Yeah.
certainly we're getting them into places like that now.
I think it was really interesting. I mean, there is a sort of, now we're with Republic of Music, so they look after our distribution now. So we're all sort of professional and legit now. But prior to that, yeah, it was just going direct, and but the response was amazing, I would say. I think we just filled a gap at the right time. There obviously are other little labels in Brighton that are pretty decent, like sort of Fat Cat and stuff they're sort of quite well established, but I just think there was no one else doing what we were doing. So it was a bit right place, right time. But yeah, they got behind it straight away, not only stocking it, but like bigging it up in their newsletter, giving it real prominent place on the website, really talking about us in really glowing terms. So yeah, even prior to Republic of Music coming on board, we were doing great. So just, it's gone fast, sort of thing, I would say, in terms of sort of brand recognition, if you want to sort of call it that. Which is lovely. But now we've got Republic of Music, everything goes out to Rough Trade and Piccadilly in Manchester and Crash and all the sort of biggies, so that's wicked now. So bit by bit, hopefully we're getting more known nationally rather than just sort of London and the South East.
So are you like reprinting vinyls that you've sold out of continuously then, or?
We haven't got there yet. No, nothing's sold out yet. Even the Welly one, we've still got a few left, interestingly.
Only a couple.
But I do wonder. Yeah, I do wonder though, when Welly sort of return this year on their big label, whoever it's going to be, don't know who it is yet. But they've got quite big management now. They've signed with ATC Live for booking agent and stuff. They're going to probably be quite, their next release will probably be quite a big fanfare. So I wonder if that will mean kickback for, the first Welly record. And then
we need to get
we talked about that, haven't we? What's that, sorry?
I was saying, Alan, we need to get on Bandcamp and get the last couple of Welly EPs because they're going to be worth something.
Stick them on Discogs in 30 years' time.
They might be.
Yeah, they really might,
Yeah, so we're definitely up for doing represses as well. And that was the other thing with doing colours as well, so the first Welly single, the first pressing is white, we've always said, the next one will be green, if it happens, so yeah, we'll be up for that one with Dorian.
Yeah, I mean, so things have sold well, but yeah, we haven't got sellouts that the other thing is as well, we have to, there's just two of us doing this, and we have to be quite sensible about what we want to do. And the other thing is we want to be working with other artists, bringing stuff out for them. So that's kind of the focus. And it doesn't mean we wouldn't work with a band again, and it doesn't mean we wouldn't do a repress on it. But at the moment, we're doing the campaigns around the records, and then kind of doing the next one. So,
but I guess it's nice for a band like Welly that you've picked up. You've done their first physical release, and now you're watching them, trot off into the sunset almost. That's like a pivotal role in that.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's a bit like, sometimes feel like we're sort of like junior school or something, and then we just packed them off to big school or packed them off to university.
Well, especially with Welly, the way they dress, that's pretty much real.
Yeah, totally. But no, it does feel like, I don't know whether we'd call ourselves a feeder label, but if it's a nice sort of place for people to come, part of their development, maybe in a few years' time, people might start to recognize this as a good breeding ground, maybe for new talent, sort of thing.
Yeah, I guess that's the next question: is like what that new talent, because it's just changed so much, hasn't it, over the last sort of 30 years? How the record industry sort of swings and roundabouts and streaming. Yeah. A lot of bands kind of have that ethos, like we don't need a record label. I don't necessarily agree with that, but what do you think that your label offers someone who hasn't got one?
Yeah, good question.
Yeah,
I think one thing is we like, we want to be a sort of safe place people can come and they can work with us, and it's not a big risk for them. You know, what a lot of labels will do is that they'll sign people up on quite lengthy deals that tie them into stuff that doesn't necessarily guarantee them getting anything out there.
No.
And it can be quite restrictive. And we're saying, we'll do a deal with you for a record. That record's going to come out probably quite soon. You know, we're not talking years for it to come out. We're not going to interfere too much. You know, we'll have conversations about a mix, right? But we're not interfering too much in that. We have conversations, and we don't also, you know, and we don't own it, you know, forever. We don't say they've got to do another one. We'd like them to want to. So I think it's a safe thing to do. And, you know, so, you know, we're just working on, we've just this week put out, or last week now, I suppose, put out a digital song with Stanford Family Band, who we've got a 12-inch coming out with in April. And, you know,
I stumbled across that track on a hunt the other day, and then I was looking at your playlist. I was like, "Oh, that's the band I was listening to yesterday." And I was trying to dig out some new stuff. Yeah,
Oh yeah, they're ours. Yeah,
cool.
Very
And you know, but they're really excited that they're going to get a vinyl record that they've designed the cover for, that's going to be in shops, right? And that their mum could buy or their mates could buy, you know, that they could see in rough trade. You know, that's cool. And it's like, so yeah, bands don't need that. They can release everything digitally. They're not going to make any money, right? Then, you know, it's not a big money business at, you know, at the kind of level that most bands are operating at. But at least this way they can get something done, you know, that is a real thing. And I think they do appreciate that, and they do want to do it.
I think a lot of the bands have come back round to it, though. I think they seem to be excited by the thought of doing a record.
Yeah.
There seems to be something in just the validation of some people putting their arm around you and going, "We think you're fucking good. You know, we believe in you," sort of thing. That seems to make them stand 10 feet tall. It seems to be, you know, a really big part of it, you know. So, and that's lovely to be able to give them that, you know, and it comes from the heart. You know, we don't sign just anyone, you know.
No.
So I think they sort of know. We'll have met them a few times because we've gone to watch them and had chats with them. So they know that if we say, "Yeah, are you up for doing a record with us?" that it's because we really, really, really like them, and I think that makes them feel good. So, yeah, to answer your question, I don't know. I think it's coming back a bit, actually. The whole kind of label thing,
Well,
as validation for bands.
I know that, you know, we predominantly do a blog at the moment, and I know that we, you know, sometimes we'll review a band. We'll just hear a song. Alan will pick out a song and he'll send it to me, and review it, and it'll be like some group of 4 teenagers from Liverpool, and I'll just write 50 words saying, "This is a really good song, check it out." And I'll get a message from them saying like, "Oh, cheers, thanks, that means so much." Yeah, just because one person out there has written one nice thing about the internet, and it's such a difference what that makes in this industry.
And they've not paid for it.
And they're not paid for it. Yeah, so difficult to get noticed. So yeah, like you say, if someone just goes, "You know what, thumbs up, man," people, you can tell just from the message, they're like, "Wow." So you know, what you're doing extended by however much, because, you know, you're putting their stuff out. I can totally see the kind of how good that must make people feel.
And you're gonna get people who are really good who self-release probably their entire career, right? You know, and when we first started working with Willie, you know, he'd self-release stuff, right? So it doesn't mean it isn't good, but anyone could do it. I'm a very average guitarist. I could go into my bedroom after this call. I could record a song. I could have it on, you know, I could get DistroKid or whatever, and I've got it on Spotify. So there's no boundaries, which is really good in lots of respects, because it does allow people to get stuff out there. But then you're one of a million tracks floating around on Spotify, right, or whatever. So, you know, there's something about having someone who said, "We're prepared to invest time and money in you and put something out," I think.
If you're enjoying this No Distance Records podcast, then why not check out our No Distance Records Release Radar playlist on Spotify and Apple Music. It features under-the-radar acts who have no more than 20,000 listeners or 100,000 plays of a song in their catalog. And if you're not enjoying this podcast, check out our playlist anyway.
What's your view on streaming, though? Because there's some people who think that streaming is the worst thing that's ever happened to music. Some people think it's fantastic. Some people you can hold both thoughts simultaneously, I think, in your mind. What do you guys feel about streaming?
I mean, I'm kind of torn on it. You know, I use Spotify all the time, right? So I'm a hypocrite if I slag it off, but it doesn't pay much money. You know, the amount of money people get on streaming, and they're as I understand it, a lot of the streaming is gonna companies are gonna start paying less to
Yeah,
smaller artists as well.
yeah, it's
Um,
gone really bad. Yeah,
I've heard that they're going to start switching the model so it's even more beneficial. Um, and it's different. And I think so it used to be when a record came out, or a song came out, that song was up against the other songs that came out that week, or if an album came out, it was up against the other albums that came out that month, right? But now it's almost like every song that comes out is up against every other song. So you're not compete if you're it's not like a Blur versus Oasis. It's like Blur versus Oasis versus Fleetwood Mac versus David Bowie, right? I think that's very difficult. So which is why the record labels primarily are interested in legacy music, right? Because it generates you money all the time, but there's no investment needed anymore. You don't need to do PR on this stuff or anything.
Yeah.
It just sells, which is why when you've got things like Record Store Day, which I really like stuff like that, but a load of it is represses of old records.
Oh, it so annoys me when Record Store Day. It's like, oh, it's another day taken over by a band. From a record label re-releasing Rumors with another sound of the toilet flushing in the background.
Yeah,
and you're
yeah.
like, no, this is not what it's supposed to be about, man. Well, to
And,
my mind, anyway.
So I think that the industry in general is kind of problematic, both from a vinyl and a streaming point of view. But the streaming thing is really tougher because unless you've got hundreds of thousands or millions of streams, you're probably not going to make any money back on it.
No.
But it does get you out there. People will listen to it, and it's not going away. That's the other thing. So that kind of.
Yeah, and figures are looked at. So there's a whole kind of, it's almost a PR stroke reputation tool, So the fact that X band that we've got, like Can Pineapple's figures are not too bad, and they've done that without any real kind of professional playlists plugging or support. So but whereas Owners Club's figures were pretty low, so we decided to invest a bit of money in a plugger for that, because it just needed to get up a bit, because the knock-on effect of the figures looking low could affect them getting a good booking agent, could affect them getting good press, So I see it at our level as almost like another PR kind of publicity tool, really. A, to obviously for people to hear the music, but B, for sort of industry people to look at the figures and go, oh yeah, they're all right, they do get a lot of listeners. So yeah, it's interesting how it's evolved like that. I barely think of it. I don't really think of it in terms of money these days. I just
get that crossover though, because I do this. I find bands on Spotify that I'm going on a hunt or finding things.
Yeah.
Then I'm like, have they got a vinyl? Because I'm enjoying it.
Right, yeah.
Then I'm across the Bandcamp, and then I'm finding their vinyl.
Oh, well, that's cool.
To do that all the time.
And I certainly do that. Yeah,
I think there's quite a lot of people doing that now. So I'm using Spotify all day, every day.
It's almost like your search tool.
Yeah.
And once you've identified what you want, then you can go off and actually
go off. Yeah. And then I have my vinyl nights. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's lovely.
Yeah, and so I think it definitely does have that effect as well. I mean, I can't remember who I was listening to, but this thing, because obviously, vinyl sales are up, they talk about, vinyl sales against CD and stuff like that. And how, although I believe CD sales are up again. But what it does, what you do find out is that most of those vinyl sales are the bigger names still. So it's like someone like Taylor Swift, right? Ed Sheeran, they sell huge amounts. So you can hear that it's kind of really healthy, but then there's a lot of acts that aren't, that there's your kind of middle level bands aren't necessarily selling that many copies. So it is still a tough industry, I think, which is why obviously sort of selling stuff at gigs is so important for artists.
Yeah, big time.
So you've done obviously quite a lot in those last couple of years. What would you go back and do different? Like, what did you learn that you weren't expecting to?
Oh, that's a really good question.
Would your wife still tell you to do it? would your wife still say, would she look at all the stretch it scores and go, don't do it?
I think she would. I think she would. I don't know. I don't know. There's a lot I would do very different because everything's kind of worked out okay. You know.
Yeah.
I think sometimes you'd allow a bit more time for things because things get a bit stressy, and you learn lessons about how to work with a pressing plant, what you need to do in terms of getting artwork together, what you need to think about when you're getting someone doing mastering, all those kinds of things. So there's lessons you learn along the way, but you have to do that. Yeah. So I'm not sure there's a huge amount different.
No, I mean, it's felt quite charmed since we've started. Everything's, fingers crossed, gone pretty well. I think the main thing I've learned is about the things you have to deal with bands. They're all quite young. Some of them are very young. In fact, one band member was 19 when we first signed them, and it's like, fucking hell, 5 years older than my son. So this seems crazy. So, and I tend to be quite, because I'm a parent, I can be a bit sort of paternal and maybe a bit soft and a bit cuddly. But actually there is a line where you do need to be a bit businesslike, and I think the lessons I've learned are just around sort of setting expectations with bands, being clear on what I'm expecting from them. If they say we're doing the artwork, maybe being better at going, okay, well, I want to see a first draft by this date. Otherwise, you'll just get given the artwork the day before it's going to the pressing plant, and you look at it like, oh, fuck me, this wasn't what I expected.
Yeah.
So, just stuff like that, really. I think it's just the sort of more professional side of things, I guess, that is just something you learn along the way, which, actually is the sort of stuff I do in my day job a lot, but I just don't think to apply it to this world, So I guess that kind of thing, really. But otherwise, I mean, the only other thing is that probably, we didn't really know a lot about getting PR involved or who we might be able to afford, in terms of at our level. So I would possibly have tried to get a bit of PR for Welly for that first record, maybe, because, it actually did really well just on its, because Welly's reputation just sort of, grew quite quickly. So it did pretty well anyway. But I think it would have been nice to have done a little bit more of a professional campaign on that one, and probably Can Pineapple as well. But we weren't there at that point.
No.
So, but I think they've still gone pretty well anyway. I think both bands are in really good positions now. So I think, no harm done, really. And I think, we did what we could. So
yeah,
touch wood, we've done all right so far. Sorry.
Yeah. So no, I was just going to say, so if bands are coming to you to ask, you interested in signing them, things like that, do you want them in a kind of certain position where they're gigging, they've got things ready to record, or they're halfway through recording, or so would it be mixed and mastered, but it's not been mastered for vinyl? It's
been quite different.
Yeah.
So the Welly songs were all done, when we spoke to him and recorded and everything, and he knew what he wanted from an artwork point of view.
Yeah, that guy had it all. He's got it all worked out. The next few years have worked out. He's like, wow. It's done. He's got a master plan.
and the other bands were all in different stages, I would say, in terms of how many songs they had, how ready they were to record, what their position was around that. They've all, everything else has been recorded since we kind of entered into discussions, but they're all kind of at a different point, I suppose. And then some of them had some music released. Stanford's, the song we put out was the first thing that they'd ever released. They'd all been everyone's been gigging, like I say, we want to see a band live as well, because a big part of it is, do we like them? Do we want to work with them? Do we think, are they going to be able to put on a good gig and someone's going to come up to them at the end of the gig and want to buy a record, right? Yeah. So, but yeah, it's sort of, I wouldn't say there's an identical formula.
No, and I don't think it matters if they haven't got stuff all recorded and ready. You know, like Dorian says, the Stanfords didn't, but you go and see them and they're just magic. They're ready. You know, they were so ready. They've just been a bit lazy. And some of them were in another band called School Disco, so they're a bit busy with that. So, but you can see it. So I think it's more in terms of what we go for. It's just, if, you know, if the magic's there, and it doesn't really matter if they're massively professional or they've recorded a lot. Joe P, the other artist that we've signed that we'll be releasing stuff with in the summer, she's massively raw, but she's, you know, she's just got something. I say she's raw. She's actually really experienced, considering she's only sort of 20, 21, but she's been gigging for years. So she's actually very, you know, well versed in performance and writing songs and everything. But there's something quite sort of raw about what she does. And she's had a couple of things out on Spotify as well, which sound great actually. But yeah, we're kind of like really looking forward to seeing how we can develop her and then sort of unleash her in the summer. I think she's going to be quite something. But to be honest, most of the bands, I think all the bands actually that we've signed, we found them ourselves rather than them approaching us. We do get a lot of emails from a lot of bands, and we always, I think I can say we've replied to every single one, haven't we, Dorian? I think so.
I think so, yeah.
You know, it's really important to always reply, I think, even if you know, you're not really, you know, it doesn't feel right for you. So, yeah, so we'll really try and reply.
I mean, I really loved the song we got from a guy in the States, and but
an American guy, you know, sent us some stuff, and he was wicked, actually.
But you know, we couldn't. I said to him, I said, look, and that, I think that was possibly before we started doing distribution. But even with that, we haven't really got a network in the States. So how are we going to sell the record more easily? We can't see him live.
Yeah.
You know, so I think it'd be great. I'd love in the future to be working with, you know, acts from other countries and putting stuff out. But at the moment, I think we need to focus on stuff that we can get a bit more hands-on with, and that we can, put shows on and stuff like that, and sort of help push it forward.
We've been coming across some really wicked bands in places like Italy and Austria and stuff. And you just think, oh, it'd be brilliant, you know, but again, it's just sort of like, the practicalities of it. Sort of rule it out. Maybe we'll
have international franchises one day.
What's goo in Italian? What's goo in? We haven't asked why goo. Why goo?
Why goo?
Yeah. It's a Sonic Youth album.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah.
We kind of we had kind of talked about a few different ideas. One of the things we were doing was checking, was there an existing label that had the same name? Because generally there was.
Yeah.
Right. And we wanted it to be, and Goo, it's not the first Goo Records, actually. There have been some in the past, but not for quite some time. So we knew there was no one active. We liked the word. It sort of had a simplicity to it. And it's Sonic Youth album title. So kind of fitted with something we liked.
Something small.
Yeah.
We both immediately went, oh yeah, and the logo's like a splat, and that was it. And then we just sort of told our art director mate at work to knock it up, and he did, and that was it. But everyone seems to quite like the logo and the name and stuff, which is really nice.
It does stick in your mind, which I guess Goo would tend to do. But yeah, it does stick. It does stick with you, which I guess is a good tagline. Goo Records will stick with you. Yeah.
Yeah, seems to. How did you get your name?
Well,
distance left to run.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So Alan and I were in a band together about 300 years ago in Essex.
Right.
And we put an EP out on CD, and it was one of them where it's like, we need to stick something in for a record label. And I don't know why. I think it was me that just went.
It was you. Yeah, you.
It was me. I don't know. I must have just been listening to No Distance Left to Run by Blur, because they're from Essex as well. So we did No Distance. And then that was sort of 10 or 11 years ago. And then when we decided to start this thing up again, we were just like, oh, well, let's just use that, because you know what it's like thinking about a name of something you can spend forever. So we were like, we've already thought about this 10 years ago. Let's trust the 10 years ago versions of us.
10 years ago, I was like, you ain't going to go anywhere. It's perfect.
Yeah. So that was why we went with No Distance, yeah.
I can see a cut out Graham behind you as well.
Yeah, there is a Graham Cox. Yeah, keep an eye on us. Yeah.
We went to see him in the summer doing in the Wave in Brighton.
Oh, really?
Oh, nice.
Him and Rose. Yeah, it was fantastic.
Yeah.
It was.
Really good.
I've
Really
not
good.
listened to that album yet. Is it good?
Oh, it's
Yeah,
wicked.
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, give it a listen, and if they play again this year, like go and see him. It's fantastic.
We went to the Wembley
the
show.
Blur gig, didn't we? In the summer,
yeah, went to the Wembley
Yeah.
show, and that was because I'd never seen him live. Alan's seen him live quite a few times. But it's just one of those bands it never worked. And so I saw him live for the first time, and it made me, took me back to being sort of 15 years old again. Drinking cider and kicking footballs at people in parks. It was like a great feeling to be back there again.
Nice.
So you've talked about the fact that you're going to be going to 12 inches and stuff. You've obviously, we're recording this now. By the time this comes out, your Alive by the Seaside release will have come out.
Yes,
that's out on Friday.
That's Friday.
Yeah. So that's Friday, 26th of January.
I can show you a copy.
He's going to show it. He's going to show us. Run off and get one. And you can tell us now, Dorian, how you're the real brains behind the outfit, and you just
all the bad things are Tony, and all the good ideas are mine.
But how did this come about, and what's made you decide to go from, you sort of made your name with the 7 inches, now you're moving on to the full lengths?
So I guess we thought we wanted to do something as a sort of compilation idea, and we would kind of come up with ideas, and we wanted to do something that was a bit of a celebration of the Brighton music scene, because all of the bands that we've worked with, we saw live in a little venue in Brighton the first time. And although I think you saw Jopie, didn't you, in Guildford or somewhere first off, maybe?
Yeah.
But generally speaking, we've been seeing the bands, in sort of little grassroots venues in Brighton. So then the idea came about putting something out that was sort of capturing that. So Brighton, all the bands on the recording are Brighton either based, so like the Wedding Present are on it. He's obviously from Leeds, but he's based in Brighton, or they're from Brighton. So they're all kind of part of the Brighton music scene, and they're all the songs are recorded in Brighton music venues, and all the money's going to go to the Music Venue Trust. So any profits we make off it will feed back into that. So it just seemed like a nice thing to do. So. And it needed to be a 12-inch to be a kind of an album, a compilation as well. So that's why we kind of did that.
Yeah, and it was hard work to pull together, but really, really proud of it. It's a really, really cracking compilation. Actually, there's some wicked tracks on it, and it just feels like it's a really nice snapshot of sort of last year and what was going on.
I think more labels should do that, a snapshot of their record label on a vinyl.
Yeah, well, like I was sort of thinking, there are other cities that have probably got, a scene like Brighton where, maybe a label should do it, in Bristol or Manchester or something, and do the same and make the profits go to the Music Venue Trust, because they do such good work, and there's so many venues closing and so many are under threat. It's awful at the moment. Until we sort of started working with them, we didn't really realise the figures, of how bad it is. It's really bad. It's really bad. And despite the fact that, in Brighton, it's such a thriving scene, some of those venues are still under threat. It's crazy. It's incredible. So,
they help
I'm
support,
really proud of it.
They help support bands tour as well, MVT. So as well as doing the work with venues, they actually do work with bands. So they'll put money into helping bands tour, because that's an expensive thing to do. Most of the bands we work with, they've all got day jobs, right?
Yeah.
They'll be working in a bar, or they're working in an office or wherever, right? Because they're not, you can't live off it. So then you've got to take, if you go touring, you've got to take time off work. You've got to pay for accommodation, maybe you've got to pay petrol, all that kind of stuff. So they can help with things like that. So it's really great because we talked.
If you want to gig outside in Europe as well, that's even more expensive.
Yes,
Brexit, it's just crippled it. Yeah,
absolutely. It's a really expensive thing for people to do, and
we did our little Lollapalooza tour in the summer. I don't know whether you saw that on the socials.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Perry Farrell still hasn't come after us for that so far. But yeah, we only really were able to do that because it was just a 5 dates, but we had a few cars, and basically all the accommodation was sort of friends or people we knew in those places, so that made it quite cheap, sort of thing. We mostly stayed southeast as well, But yeah, it's an expensive old do.
What's your ultimate ambitions for the label? You talked about labels there like Fierce Panda, who you know sort of inspired you, and Merge Records as well. And I listened to that very same podcast, and it's really interesting how that they're going along for 10 years, and then they get the Arcade Fire album, which they didn't listen to at first. I think it was sitting on their desk, and they both ignored it. And then they realized, oh, this is a really good record. We should probably try and put this out. But what's your ultimate ambitions, and where do you see yourself in sort of 5-10 years time? Drunk at the Brit Awards.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, look, we'd like, like we said, we've had sort of success with the records we put out. People, they've been well received. People have bought them, right? And that's great. It would be nice to sort of, have something take off. That'd be wonderful, if something really captured the imagination and it was getting, it was all over a Six Music playlist and flying out the shops. It'd be nice to do a sort of an album with a band as well at some point, because although we're doing 12 inches, they're going to be 6-track EPs to start off with. So there's lots of things that there's so much we could do, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it is so much about money. But it'd be really nice for Goo to be get to a point where it's organically funding, and just growing and growing, so that the next thing can be funded, can be a bit bigger, and just sort of get to a point where it is feasible for us to put an album out by an artist, and maybe have a bit of a longer future together, that's definitely viable. And for us to make a little, if we could not do our day jobs and pay the mortgage doing this, it'd be wonderful.
Amazing.
But that's obviously probably a long way off. But it would just be really nice to see, if some of them just sort of really took off. I just think it would have so many knock-on effects, both for us and the artists, the other artists around us as well. So, I guess 5 years time, albums I guess would be the thing, and it be feasible. I think our short-term goal though is to I think we're pretty well known now. I was thinking sort of Brighton, South East and stuff. Be nice to be a bit more nationally recognized, I think, so that then we could say to promoters up in Scotland or something, oh, we want to bring the Goo bands up, and they're like, oh yeah, fantastic. It's not there yet, but I think that would be nice. We don't feel like we're quite in that place yet.
No.
Are you signing bands outside of Brighton all around the country, or you just
it's
staying local?
Not totally open to them being from anywhere. It just always goes slightly back to that thing of wanting to see them live, at least once, and getting to know them a bit. Often they're quite young, so often we end up meeting the parents as well and stuff like that, and it all counts, it all matters, sort of to part of the experience, because we quite like to make it feel like a little family, and really nice and close and warm. So that sort of thing. So if they're a long way away, it can prove difficult, but certainly wouldn't rule it out.
I mean, Owners Club aren't a Brighton band.
No,
I first saw them in Brighton, but they're not a million miles away.
No, they're like King and Guildford and stuff.
But we'd definitely not be against it, and we have talked about other bands that are a bit further afield, but it is more complicated from the point of if we can't get to see them live or whatever as well. But we're totally up for it.
If there was one that we were like, wow, they sound so good, and we watched some footage of them or something, I would travel to go and see them if we thought they were that good. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Wouldn't necessarily do rough trade flying to New York to bag Strokes, but I'd go to Norwich on a Tuesday.
You go all Goo Records will go all the way to Norwich to find the next big band
in my little Citroen if need be.
So not Peterborough though.
So if Britain's best undiscovered new band from Norwich listens to this podcast, then they should hook us up.
Touch.
Yeah,
I will drive there.
I've not come across many bands from Norfolk actually.
No.
What is it? Busted in the Darkness and Ed Sheeran. They're your three, aren't they? And
Well,
what,
I'm just-
what a legacy that is.
I'm just thinking, like when we do our playlist, I always have a look. We've had bands all over the world, but none from Norfolk.
I think you might be quite controversial there, Owen, because I've got a feeling they're Suffolk, aren't they? Ed Sheeran.
Oh, do you know what? You're right. Oh, you're
I
right.
think are the Darkness from Lowestoft or something like that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's the Lowestoft. Yeah,
is that Suffolk?
Yeah, that's Suffolk.
Oh man, I'm embarrassed myself. Oh, I'm never going to be able to look Justin Hawking in the eye again. What a tragedy that would be. Anything else, Alan? We need to squeeze these from these guys. Any more goo we can squeeze out? That's disgusting.
I think we've squeezed all the goo.
I regret that already.
Where do you want people to find your records? Like where should people go to find your records?
Bandcamp,
I know you've got Spotify playlists and Instagram and
yeah, I mean, ideally Bandcamp, just because the bands get the most money from that.
Yeah.
But you know, if they're in rough trade and they see it, or you know, they're online and they see it on Piccadilly Records or something, absolutely brilliant. But yeah, I guess Bandcamp is the best. For Goo News, I guess Instagram is where we play most, like most people sort of in music at the moment.
We stick stuff on Facebook and Twitter as well, but we tend to get most engagement on Instagram. We got the Goo Records website as well.
The GooRecords.com website as well, yeah. And then
that always links through to like, you know, where you can buy the records from and streaming and stuff. Because as much as, like, say, we want to sell records, we want people to enjoy the music too. So not everyone can afford to spend. We get it, you know. Not everyone's got a record player.
Yeah.
Not everyone can afford to spend the money on it. We get that as well. Yeah. So people can't, and they want to stream it. Good stuff. Although we have got the compilation album is our first CD venture as well. We've got some CDs with that one.
Yeah, we did CDs as well.
That reminds me, actually, I need your guys' help because I'm trying to get cassettes to come back because I released an album last year on cassette and it just was a complete fucking waste of time. But I think if you guys get behind the cassette revival, maybe together we can ship the cassettes I've got sitting under my desk.
I've got a few cassettes, and I don't know if I've even still got a working cassette player. But there's a record label, I think it's Burger Records or something like that specializes in doing cassette versions of albums for bands.
There's one in Toronto,
maybe in the States,
called Spirit of Analog, which I think just does like 1 or 2 cassettes. But yeah, it's not quite been. I think I read too many blogs on it, and I got a little bit carried away. And I was like, "Oh, cassettes, man!" And then no, I was completely wrong.
There's a few bands though. I mean, Owners Club did some cassette stuff, and there's a band that we like.
Yeah, you got it. You're the only one. Yeah, cheers, man.
Actually, yeah, what Owners Club did was he bought like cheap, didn't he? A job lot of TDKs and just copied, did it at home and did a sort of photocopy cover and sold them for $5.
Yeah, it was proper DIY. But there's a band we like called My Fat Pony. I don't know if you've come across them, but fantastic band. Check them out. But they put cassettes out for their last little release that looked really nice. Right. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure either.
Probably not where we're going to
have a few. You might get rid of a few, but I don't think you'd be shipping them out in the hundreds.
I don't think you're not paying your mortgage on the cassette sales.
No.
I'm not sure about that.
Guys, thanks so much for chatting to us. Like, honestly, you guys, I've loved you guys since I first saw Welly and I saw they were with you. And I love the way you do it on Instagram. I love the fact that I could walk into a shop in Brighton and go, "Have you got anything released by Goo Records?" And they go, "Yeah, we have." And it was like, wow, what a recognition to have in, I think it was last summer. So yeah, about a year you turned that around. So fantastic work, guys. And like, brilliant. Most important thing is the music's really great. I genuinely love all the stuff you've put out. I think it's all fantastic. So yeah.
Thank you. It means a lot.
It really does. Guys. Yeah, that's very kind.
Thanks, Alan.
Lovely stuff.
You're listening to a No Distance Records podcast. Make sure you subscribe, like, follow to get updates on releases, events, and other things we've not even thought of yet.
Oh, Alan, what a great interview. What a great interview was that?
That was great. They were really open with us, weren't they?
Really, such nice guys. I thought it was really interesting how a bit like football scouts, until they've seen the player play live, they're not going to sign him,
not going to sign him, yeah.
They don't want to sign George Weah's cousin or whatever. I thought it was really interesting how they've got this really clear plan up. They do the 7 inches, make money on that, or, you know, build a reputation on that. And then from that, they're getting into rough trade now. They're getting into the big shops. Yeah. I just thought they were really great, and we're going to link to them all. And also, we've put a playlist together of their bands that we'll link to as well. It's probably flying around your screen now, and as is all their Instagram stuff. But or if you're listening on the podcast, come to our website, nodistancerecords.co.uk, or our Instagram at nodistancerecords. I'm sure you know how this stuff works. So yeah, nice one, Al. I enjoyed that. Did you enjoy that?
I did enjoy that.
Fine.
I feel like they've achieved so much in
Yeah.
such a short period of time.
Do you think
I
they've
think-
made it look a bit too easy?